Rick Harsh here. Um, Today I'm going to attempt to do a book review of Sesshu Foster and Arturo Romo's uh, new book, A History of the East Los Angeles Dirigible Air Transport Lines, which I've been referring to as ELADATL for a long time. This book has been a project underway for many years. I believe it was picked up by City Lights about 15 years ago. They're very slow to get things actually done. Anyway, but they put out two novels by Sesshu Foster, if you count this, which, he is actually the writer. Arturo Romo is the illustrator. And he did, in 2005, that's 16 years ago, City Lights put out Atomic Aztecs, which is one of my favorite books. And this I knew would be one of my favorite books. And it is, and describing it is going to be a little bit difficult, and so I brought along some help. This is The City of the Future by Sesshu Foster, published by, I think, Kaya Press. I don't know why he goes back and forth. I think probably because Kaya is like I think they publish mostly Asian literature. Sesshu Foster is half Japanese and half something else. His father was Ray Foster, a very interesting man with a lot of flaws, including a tendency to drink too much, and he was an abstract painter. And so Sesshu had an interesting childhood, and he ended up being raised as a half Japanese, half something else, but not Mexican or Latin American, in the Mexican Latin American East Los Angeles neighborhood of City Lights. And the first book I read by him was called City. Did I say City Lights? Fuck, sorry. I meant City Terrace. City Terrace is the neighborhood. It's kind of on a hill, and you can see Dodger Stadium from there, from his ma's house. And he wrote a book called City Terrace Field Manual, which I read in the early 90s. It came out, I think, the year that I met him, which was in 1994. We were at the Iowa Writers Workshop together. I got there a year before him, and so we overlapped by a year. I met him when he called me because he had called the people in the office at the Writers Workshop, and for some reason they knew I was one of the few people who didn't go anywhere in the summer, stuck around Iowa City. And Sesshu called, and he said, that he had a big truck coming, and he needed a lot of help, as many people as I could get or whatever, to come over to his house and help him unload, move in. And he's willing to pay. I don't know if he gave the figure, but I said, well, yeah, no problem, we'll do it, but I'm not taking money for it. He said, why not? I said, well, we're going to be in a classroom, together probably at some point, and I don't want to be looking at you and thinking, Christ, that guy's my boss. So I gathered some people who were around. Then we went over to Sesshu's house and we moved him in, and they probably fed us, but no money changed hands at all. And you're going to have to take my word for that. You can't take his word, as you'll find out when you read the book, because there's a lot of contradictory information in here, and there's even we'll get to the book. I wanted to start though with an Iowa City story, because this is one of my favorite events at the Iowa Writers Workshop. At the time, it was run by Frank Conroy, who sadistically enjoyed a reputation for being able to crush spirits of young writers. Charlie Buck, famous person at that time in the workshop, tough broad, they said. Charlie Buck. I mean, what a name, Charlie Buck. You don't fuck with Buck. And I was told that Conroy reduced her to tears in one of his workshops, destroying her work and whatever. And I know many other people who had been damaged, really, by Frank Conroy. I remember one person who wrote this fantastic story, and Conroy convinced him that, it was terrible. And he could not do what he did, which was a nice surreal twist that he did rather elegantly in a short story that was later published in a book of short stories by this person. And, so Conroy, and I was actually a streak writer because of my lifestyle and whatever. I would always have to write and then get a job, save enough money so I could write again, get a job. And the workshop was designed to get me out of that cycle. And so I was a streak writer, and Conroy met with us the first week or so there. And the first thing he told me is, that there are no streak writers. No streak writers. You can't be a streak writer. You have to go to, the only way to write is you go to the same place every day for 3 hours. Whether you write or not, you stay there. And that's the only way to do it. You can't be a streak writer. I said, well, I am a streak writer. And and I remained a streak writer. And I tend to be a streak writer. And, nothing can change that. Certainly not some old fuck who never really wrote a terrific book in his own life. And, anyway, but the funny thing, this is the damaging part of Frank Conroy is, okay, so he believes you can't be a streak writer, right? And so he tells me, you can't be a streak writer. But in class, he tells this wonderful story about the streak writer and the streak writing that produced 100 Years of Solitude, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It's a great story. He got in mind the idea that you got he got a voice, and I'm going to combine the voice of a child and the voice of my grandmother, and that'll be the voice that tells 100 Years of Solitude. And once he got that idea, he went up to the top floor of his house, 2 stories maybe, and just for 2 or 3 months, he wrote and never left that story of the house. Food was brought up to him and so on. And is that not amazing? Well, it is amazing. The book is amazing. And no matter how Gabriel Garcia Marquez wrote that book, it's amazing. But basically what Conrad is saying is the last thing you should be saying at a writer's workshop, much less a famous one that's supposed to produce a lot of great writers, is that, you can't do it. You can't do it. Gabriel Garcia Marquez can do it. What I would suggest to anybody who wants to start a workshop is that you kind of take the opposite route, and you start with the idea that you can do it. And the job of the writer's workshop is only to try to help you get to the place where you actually can do it. And so he was a real asshole, Conroy. And he was also noted, okay, already I've established he's a scary, sadistic, inconsistent, hypocritical prick. But on top of that, he had the reputation for, in his workshop, everybody taught a semester workshop. In Frank Conroy's workshop, it was well noted that nobody signs up what they do for the workshop is they send around a piece of paper, and you put there's dates on it, and you put your name in when you want to be received or whatever. So when Frank put out that, everybody knew, don't go. Everybody'd been warned. Don't go up the first week. Don't go the first week, because he just destroys people the first week. 2 people, 3 hours, 2 people. You have an hour and a half, and then a break, and then another hour and a half. So Sesshu and I were in Frank's class together, and when the list was passed, I signed up for the first day, and as soon as it got to Sesshu, he signed up for the same day. So me and Sesshu went up the first day, naturally, because we didn't give a shit about Frank Conroy. We didn't care what he said. I handed in the first 2 chapters of The Driftless Zone, my first published novel, virtually as it is right now. I remember that I changed a word in the first paragraph, and probably my editor got me to change a word or 2. But, Frank was so, of course, he didn't like Sesshu either. So, he didn't like anybody in the first day. So he really wants to rip into Sesshu, but he decided that I was more in need of rippage. And so he went overtime. And the time he spent on me, it's supposed to be about an hour and a half. He spent at least 2 hours ripping or trying, fecklessly attacking what I wrote. And and it ate into Sesshu's time severely. So that when we took a break, we had very little time, and then he just said a bunch of half-hearted, mean shit about what Sesshu wrote. Then we went on about our lives, and Sesshu is a very successful writer and poet, and I am what I am. Happy with my writing, and happy with my publishing company, and happy with my friendship with Sesshu, which has borne a lot of fruit. He's an inspiring man. He's a community activist, teacher, and I don't know what he would have produced if he didn't have to work so much to make a living, but he produces constantly anyway. He's a fanatical postcard writer, and fanatical's the wrong word, I know that, but I'm not going to waste your time looking for the right word. He writes a lot of postcards, and I've quoted them in one of my own books. I've quoted one, and he's always on as a poet, and as a novelist. Well, I'm not sure how he thinks. City Terrace Field Manual was about growing up in City Terrace, and it was a book of, I suppose, prose poems. And he's had several. I was going to make a list of all of his books, but you can find them. The 20th century books are Atomic Aztecs, World Ball Notebook, which is a book of poetry, City of the Future, book of poetry, and ELADATL, a novel. And that's official. His presses are City Lights and Kaya Press. And hats off to Kaya for publishing a couple of books by Sesshu, at least, maybe 3. But I guess, I don't know, City Lights should have published this. I think they published World Ball Notebook, which was after Atomic Aztecs. I don't know. But the thing is, the first thing to understand about Sesshu is that he is what I would call a Dada realist. And what I mean by that is he uses techniques that I would say come from the notion of Dadaism. Tristan Tzara would love him. And but he also is a realist. He's a very political writer, and yet he's a very funny writer, and he's an extremely interesting poet. And his idea of poetry is basically whatever he puts on the page can be made into a poem. Whatever form you use can be a poem. His postcards are always, it seems, poems. An email can be a poem. Anything can be a poem. He's taught me a lot about existing in this new world that I reject, the technological world that we live in. I reject it out of hand, but then I see Sesshu on Facebook. I think, I fucking hate Facebook. Why is he? But what he puts on Facebook is what he does on Facebook is he disseminates information, stories that you won't get elsewhere. People send them to him. He sends them out. He finds his own, whatever. But you get great sources. So if you watch any of the news channels on standard television, and I don't mean Fox, but others, if you want to know who's being droned lately, or what's happening in the quotidian life of the apartheid state of Palestine, Sesshu will have sources, and he's very environmentally active and aware, and politically active and aware, and has been pretty much his whole life. He's about my age, and maybe a couple of years older, but he's never stopped, and he's put a life's worth of energy into being a community and global activist. And so, of course, his books reflect that. But interestingly, in Atomic Aztecs, now it's a little easier to discuss it, the story of Atomic Aztecs, than ELADATL. I mean, to summarize it. So I'll do it just to make a point. Atomic Aztecs is an alternate reality novel, and even saying that kind of makes it sound like less than it is. But what Sesshu does is he writes the contemporary history or recent history as if the Aztecs had won, and but history went on the same, more or less. So what it leads to, in one case, is a band of the Aztecs in Stalingrad, and the Battle of Stalingrad. Everybody knows about it, I think, and how important it was, what it was like. We've seen movies, we've read histories, and the best practical, realistic writing I've ever read about Stalingrad was written by Sesshu Foster. You get the best descriptive passages about being in Stalingrad. They come from a novel with an absolutely crazy concept, and he's able to do that because actually you can do anything you want, right, Frank? Right, Frank? Oh, that's right. You're in a grave. Well, anyway, so that's something that's hard to describe. When you invent a history and an alternate history, this one is a little bit different because it is broken up into time periods, like in he follows a sort of poetic structure in a structureless poem, or one whose structure seems to be dictated by the content, whereas actually that can't be true because the content, is second, but or first. I don't know. I can't. I could give you. I was going to write a list of the chapters and what they were about, but it would be sort of didactic, I think, and dry. And anyway, what do you need to know about this crazy concept. Well, you need to know that it does go into a future, and that future depicts the present plus not much, plus nothing changes. And in Sesshu's life, nothing changes. Politically, nothing changes if except for the worse. There was environmental concern, radical environmental concern in the 60s and 70s, and the system has totally, fucked the environment and the environmentalists to the point where they're powerless. When you look at the things that Trump signed into law, just giving away national parks. I mean, there is no strategy that can save the planet at this point, at this second, as I speak. There is no strategy to save the planet. So of course the planet's fucked. And this book discusses some of ELADATL's people dealing with that future, in that future. And I won't describe it to you. I'll let Sesshu's poetry, and that's one of the things that makes reviewing him hard, because when he describes the future, I'm doing this a lot because of a certain atmospheric phenomenon, and that he describes extremely well. He's the kind of poet, I can tell you this, he's the kind of poet that thrives on blocks of descriptive terms that are sort of the quotidian landmarks of the urban landscape. Bricks are big, and steel rods and flowers, even trees, poles, and he does all that, but he's very funny, and a lot of the humor is through juxtaposition. He'll make a list. Maybe I'll see if I can find a funny poem in here. I was going to use bookmarks, but then I thought, I just marked everything. So then I end up doing this, which could, if I stop talking, is dead air. So if I can do this without dead air, it's fine. This is just one line, and just you tell me what you make of this. I don't want to tell you what you should make of it. And if I tell you what I make of it, it's as if I did make something of it, and I ain't gonna lie to anybody. But I loved it. Just part of a poem, okay? The reddened subjunctive is a ball-peen hammer on the tin of peppercorns unnoticed by the sheriff's department SWAT team. Just something I marked in here. By the way, I reviewed this book in a nonfiction book that I wrote called Walk Like a Duck, a season of Little League Baseball in Italy, which is written in diary form, was a diary of my son's baseball season in Italy. And so it takes in a lot of different things besides baseball, because you're writing every day, and different things happen. And one thing that happened was that Sesshu's City of the Future came out, and I think I can find this. I probably should quote from it. I should have prepared. This is when I really fucked up. I should have prepared this, and I'm really sorry that I didn't. Dodger Dogs. Okay, page 334. All right, that didn't take so long, didn't it? Page 334. Page 334 is Okay, May 3rd, 2018. Dodger Dogs are famous. And Sesshu tried for a long time to get into Farmer John's sausage plant. I think he made it in, finally, in Atomic Aztecs. And there's a lesson there for all writers. In the assassination of Olof Palme, I revived my fictional self to send him on jobs like this that I couldn't manage. I know Sesshu tried to get a field trip to Farmer John's, and I don't know. There's some funny stuff in here about Farmer John's. But I wrote in this book, I wrote Orgasms or Cries for Help, a review of Sesshu Foster's City of the Future. And then I wrote a straight up review. And here's something, I guess I could read it from this, but since I just found it, a Sesshu Foster poem that I particularly like. It's called Ghost Prayer. Problem with doing book reviews on BookTube is you have to speak. Shoot Dick Cheney through the eye if I am tortured to death in a corner of Bagram Air Force Base in Abu Ghraib in a black site tonight. So says the ghost flickering off and on like a midnight street lamp over a Mexicali schoolyard. Shoot Henry Kissinger through the right eye if I am to die with my children in a field, with my children in the desert, with my children in a ditch. So says the ghost, flickering off and on like a parking lot light at a midnight Sunset Boulevard motel. Shoot Donald Rumsfeld and Donald Trump through the teeth if I am to die in the worst possible way, bones dissolved in a barrel of acid, ashes swirling away at the dump. So says the ghost, flickering on and off like the little lights in the heels of the toddler's sneakers skipping down the sidewalk. That was no comment. I love that poem. Interesting things happen when you feel free to write what you like, and some of the writer friends that you're involved with feel the same way, and you're part of a community and you support yourself. We have America and the Cult of the Cactus boots coming out from my press on Monday, and you'll see a lot of that in there. Absolute generous propulsion. You'll see that. I've been, tossing Sesshu here and there for years, but we write very differently, and he provides an example of that right here. He writes, my favorite. This is in ELADATL, and one of the narrators says, my favorite writer, Rick Harsh. This is fiction. I'm not his favorite writer, I'm sure of it. But my favorite writer, Rick Harsh, coming from a long line of subway tunnel families and high-climbing iron workers. See, that's not true either, so it's fiction. Author of the trade classics, Belaying and Rappelling with Guts. I'd like to have written that. And Sensual Buildering and Erotic Stegophilie. I like it on top. I like that title too. Writes, and this is quoting Rick Harsh, that's me, the fucking fascist capitalist assholes, both as a class and as individuals, goddamn want us motherfucking dead or fucked up and frozen in catatonic postures of shit-eating horror, blindsided by their horrible motherfucking goddamn fuck-off piss-ass delusions of grandeur, those motherfucking assholes. That's why we have to camouflage in the infrastructure. That last part doesn't sound like me. Before that, it does sound like me, and to a degree in my fiction, but also in, the kind of postcard I might write to Sesshu. I don't know if that's real or in any way, except in the way that things need to be real, at the greatest depth and on the surface, because this is what I think one thing that metafiction strives to do is to connect the depths and the surface. Maybe that's been said before a million times. But one thing I want to definitely do with ELADATL is, the book, the novel ends on page 242. And because it's a Sesshu Foster book, you don't say, oh, okay, satisfied with that story. That was good. Let's put it away. Never mind the 70 further pages, which are called appendices. And he does some funny stuff in here. What is the purpose of mystery? Interview with Oscar Zeta Acosta. I remind you, he was the 300-pound Samoan, who really wasn't Samoan, but from Hunter Thompson and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And he asks a set of absurd questions and gets what he gets. And then it goes on. Another appendix is interview with Juan Fish. I don't know where he got Juan Fish or who is Juan Fish. Juan Fish may be invented, or I may be ignorant. But he has a lot of trouble getting the interview. But he asks the exact same questions. The first one is, what is the purpose of mystery? What is the purpose of death is second. And then he goes on with various ones, and he says, I want to ask about spots I sometimes see. The doctors couldn't find anything, so what about these spots I sometimes see, which writhe like serpents across my eyesight? Do they exist? Another question is, let's see, what is the connection between the conspiracies of the 60s and modern conspiracies of today, etc.? Okay, that's sort of a normal one. Sites that he sees in East LA. Stairs to Nowhere and the people who walk them. What about that? But there, occasionally people go to unlicensed storefront curanderos and get sold nasty stuff that makes them sick or die. But isn't that better than Scientology? Or is it the same? He asked them both that. And I don't know if you'll be satisfied with any of the answers. But every bit of the appendices must be read, particularly because it's not a normal book. So what in pretty much the last sequence, he actually is giving you the first sequence, the people talking about it's a collaborative project. In the end, he and Arturo Romer were the last two standing, probably in the last 90% of the writing of the book. But there's talk about making the film or the book or whatever. Making the film, that's part of it. Hollywood's a big part of this in its way. They're not sure if it's better to start this transport line or if it might be a better idea to make a movie about it in order for their political purposes. But here you have all is now in flux. This is on page 305 near the end of the appendices. All is now in flux and changing. Everything is anomalous and hoax. Even the hoax and story of gravity only dictates one direction of many directions and can be called into question as readily as the Mothman hoax. Our blood flows up and down, across and back, pumped by a strange hoax. The heart muscle flowing through strange mythic channels called veins. These words follow a mythical set of systems to become a strangely manifest hoax. The myth of dictated words and mythical symbols represent ideas, themselves anomalous and deceptive, laid down in quick-drying hoax ink, on a mythical and unprovable substrate. This paper that you hold in your hand and the content on it and the brain functions that lead you to understand it are all unprovable hoaxes perpetuated by overactive imagination susceptible to the influence of myth. On, over, on top, based on. All orientations and relation is ghost-like and anomalous. Directionality and placement, composition and divine order are hoaxes and mythologies. I'm thinking we exist and ultimately are mythical, like a play with no director or audience, no script or stage, no actors, no props. For reference, please see Mirror Scene in ZAD, mythical movie from the hoax year of 2016. That comes at the back of the book, and in a part where he's talking to someone about how to write this book or what they need to write this book. Now, I could have told you a lot more about the book. It's been 35 minutes, and I guess what I most want to say is, I've been calling Atomic Aztecs one of the great books of this century that will be considered such at the end of the century, and that this would be one of those as well. But I'm coming up with another understanding. I think that the formative books of Sesshu Foster are very important. City Terrace Field Manual was terrific and should be read. Just like, if you want to learn more about any writer, go back to something early and autobiographical if it exists. And it's a terrific book. But I think now that that there's a block of books, 4 books so far, City of the Future, ELADATL, Atomic Aztecs, and World Ball Notebook, that combined are going to be one of the features of this century's literature that is as important as anything else that's ever been written. No one I've read has written as importantly and directly, yet indirectly and hilariously as well, about the nightmares of our time. And so Sesshu Foster's ELADATL comes with, you can read it. It stands alone, but read everything. Read it a couple of times. I will. And but also be aware that you're getting basically a book of poetry as well. Just like with this, you're also getting a novel. And they're separated, categorized, whatever, but you're getting Sesshu Foster, who's a poet, novelist, and a Dada realist, is what I'm going to call him. Thanks for bearing with me if you did, and if you didn't, you can skip this ad in 3 days.